This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
There we go, 1 minute. All right. All right, well, I'm going to open this meeting and say welcome to Dr. Perrone. We want to welcome you to Easthampton, and we'd like to open this interview by asking school committee to introduce themselves.
I'm Aaron Goldstein. I'm the chair of the finance subcommittee, and I also said this too. I have a child in the school district. So.
Hello, Dr. Perrone. I'm Laurie Garcia, as you know, and I am on the policy committee and the wellness committee, which really isn't a committee anymore, but it still is committee.
It's worth mentioning.
Yes.
I'm Megan Harvey. I'm the secretary of the school committee and have a gaggle of kids in the school district.
That's a lot.
It's 3, but that's a lot.
Hi, I'm Shannon Dunham. I am on the school committee and I am a member of the policy subcommittee.
Hi, Ben Hersey, school committee, and I have a child in the district, and I'm on the policy subcommittee and the equity committee.
Nicole LaChapelle, I'm the mayor of Easthampton, therefore I have a seat on the city council as a non-presiding member.
And I'm Cindy Kwasinski, the chair, and I'm also on our finance subcommittee. So welcome.
Thank you so much.
So our format consists of 3 parts. First, we invite you to make an opening statement, and after that, we'll have a series of questions that we'll ask you. And we'll close by listening to any comments you wish to make and allow you an opportunity to ask any questions you have for us. So, would you like to give a brief opening statement?
Certainly. First, I'd just like to recognize the work that the search committee did and thank them for the opportunity to be here tonight. I want to commend Easthampton and the committee for the process that you established and the structure that it imposed and the confidentiality that went along with it. It meant a lot to me to be a part of a process that was so run so well. And I think process is a very important thing, and being able to put in place a process that keeps the integrity of the system in place, it benefits us all. My opening statement, I guess, would be that when I walked in this building today to meet with a group, I felt like I was coming home. I don't think I could have kept the smile off my face if I tried. I have so many memories of this community and this building, even though they were 8 years ago, that I've been kind of floating around around town as I got shuttled from place to place and meeting to meeting. And just to see the amazing effect of time on Easthampton and, what happened in Mountain View and that facility, the resources that were allocated to the schools and to make this a place that people want to be, makes me want to be too. I live in Westhampton, and I am excited by the opportunity to be back here and to be superintendent, which is a position I've always aspired to. And I want you all to understand that I know how difficult it is to be a superintendent and the challenges that you face as a superintendent. And no one can do it alone. And I think the importance of collaboration, the importance of communication, community, and compassion are what drive me in the day-to-day. And what makes the job worth it isn't the hours in the office, it's being with the students. That meeting I had in Mr. Brown's room today with those kids, that was a refreshing opportunity to see what Easthampton's really all about. And just being able to connect and engage with them and hear from them and be questioned by them. And of course, they threw me a softball around the snow day, but that was the easy question. They had some good questions that they brought to me. And it really helped me reground myself in Easthampton, because I've been away for 8 years, but I'm very excited to be back, and I'm extremely excited to be a part of this opportunity to take over the leadership and superintendency.
What do you perceive as the superintendent's role in the community?
Well, the superintendent's role in the community, much of what we do is focused on Mass General Law. And we have roles and responsibilities within Mass General Law around accountability and compliance and reporting. And that's important. And you have to make sure you hit those dates and those benchmarks and those targets. But I would suggest that that's not the most important piece. The most important piece of superintendency is making connections and engaging with people, including the community, the stakeholders. And when I talk about stakeholders, I think about caregivers and guardians and parents, teachers, paraprofessionals, custodial staff, clerical staff. I mean, we have to engage, and we can't forget about the kids. You know, I talk about that meeting I had today, you know, kind of lifting me up and making me excited, but that's what makes the job worth doing. Nobody wants to be a superintendent if you can't engage and connect with the kids. And that's what it's all about. Being in buildings, being present, and being engaged. And that's, I think, the answer to your question is, you know, what's the role? The role is to be engaged with the stakeholders of the community to the benefit of the students in the community. And the decisions that we make, and I say we purposefully, the decisions that we make need to be made through the lens of what's best for kids. That's what it's all about.
Thank you very much.
You got it.
Next question for you. In what ways do you see yourself utilizing the bargaining process to promote equity with other districts in attracting and retaining staff? And what pushback from the community or school committee would you anticipate, and how would you approach that situation?
It's an interesting question. So, I mean, the bargaining process is all about contract, right? It's all about working conditions. It's all about class sizes. It's all about what we need to do in order to have a structured, clearly defined expectation for teachers, for administrators, for paraprofessionals, et cetera. So when I think about the bargaining process and how we use it to promote equity with other districts, I mean, I assume you're talking about equitable rates of pay so that we are able to attract candidates who are going to do the best that we need for our kids, right? So I don't think there's anybody in this room that would say we want to underpay somebody in the roles that are so important, which is interacting and teaching our children. So I had conversations today with many people from many different segments of our community here, and nobody talked about taking money away. Everybody, to a person, talked about what resources can we bring to the table to attract better, to retain longer, to ensure that we are meeting the needs of those students that are in front of us. And those students and the needs that they bring are becoming more and more complex and more intense. And that is a social emotional concern. It's an academic concern. And we have to meet our kids where they are. And so we have to bring the best talent in that we can bring in. You know, and when you think about diversity and when you think about equity and inclusion, you know, who do I see in the classroom as a teacher, as a student? Who am I seeing? Am I seeing someone that looks like me? Am I seeing someone that has the same experiences that I had? Or am I seeing someone that's different than me? And so we have to consider and be cognizant of our kids and the needs that they have and the diversity that they bring to the table. Are we reflecting that diversity in our staff? And one of the most difficult things to do in Western Massachusetts is to attract a diverse staff from the East. And in my former district, in my current district, whether I was in Carson City or here, we always struggled with that. And that's not an us alone problem. That's a system-wide problem. What's happening at the colleges when we're promoting? I guess I'm getting off track, aren't I? I was rolling, I don't know. So back to the bargaining process. We have to be aware of the resources we need to put in place to attract people who are going to meet the needs of our kids. And ideally, when we think about equity, we want to make sure that we are competitive. But when I think about equity, I also want to think about who are our kids seeing in front of them. Can we find people that are meeting the needs of our kids that have similar experiences, that look the same? And that's not everybody. In West Side we have 51 languages spoken, 52 languages spoken district-wide. You can't find that level of diversity, right? But what are we doing to attract people? So I guess what pushback? I don't think there's going to be any pushback. No one's going to reasonably say, no, don't do that. Pay him $20 an hour and, that teacher will come here for sure. No, they won't. We have to be aware of those things. So I don't anticipate pushback. One thing to obviate pushback is to communicate with people and be clear on what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do it. And making sure that we're all on board with the why, so that if there's understanding, we can have a conversation if you disagree with the direction that we're going. So I wouldn't anticipate pushback if we're looking to meet the needs of our kids. No one wants to not do that. Double negative, but it worked.
Student achievement is at the core of public school systems. We all know that there are many facets to student achievement, but in regard to student performance, how would you use student performance data to prioritize the use of resources, including money, facilities, and human capital?
You guys aren't messing around with these questions, huh? I guess when I think about data, there's authentic, relevant local data that can be used to make those decisions. There's data from standardized tests that can be used to make those decisions. And I think about those things, and I think about triangulation of data and looking at various data sets to make sure that we are using the data in all its facets to meet the needs of the kids in front of us. We have to identify needs and dial those needs in to determine what interventions need to be put in place. Right? We all know what happened, 2.5 years ago. And we're still recovering, and I put that in quotes, we're recovering from the pandemic. And that is not simply about academics. It's also about social and emotional. It's also about mental health. There's a lot of people that are not okay. And it's hard to access the curriculum when you're not okay. So, when I think about data's important, but it's not just about MCAS. It's not just about accountability. It can't be. It needs to be about our local data, our benchmark data, right? The assessments that our departments are putting together, the assessments we're using in elementary school to identify foundational skills. Where are our kids? And then what are we doing to meet the needs of those kids in those specific skill deficit areas, right? That's where we have to dial in the resources. Do we need a reading specialist, a math specialist, a curriculum coordinator? When I think about high school, are we meeting the kids where they are with respect to what's next? I talked to the kids in Brian's room one of the last meetings about what's next for you. We have to think about what's next. How are we providing them with the skills that they need for what's next? And I would argue to you quite strongly that you don't need to be able to take a multiple choice test in your next thing, whatever that is, whether it's welding or whether it's college or whether it's a job. We need to prepare kids to be problem solvers, to be collaborators. right? Interdisciplinary understanding of problems and how to solve them. So I guess when I think about data, we can't just get hung up on the data that gets in the newspaper around MCAS and accountability. There's plenty of people at the state and the federal level that are hung up on that. That's not going to help our kids. What we need to do to help our kids is look at local, relevant, authentic data and determine how we can meet their needs and then bring the resources to bear there. And again, there's nobody in this room that would say, nope, hey, Vito, you identified this need. I'm not going to give you that money to do that. No, I identified a need. I have the data to show it. It's authentic data. Are you going to help me? Yes, I am. I guarantee you everybody in this room is going to say yes. So, with respect to prioritization, unfortunately, you can't be everything for everybody. And there's a triage, right? Again, we have to think about the mental health of our kids, our teachers, right? To make sure they're in a place to deliver and receive and access curriculum. And if we're not doing that, that data doesn't mean anything anyways.
Okay, why are you seeking this superintendency? And how do you see your particular skill sets working effectively for Easthampton? And why do your skills match our needs?
So I didn't see the this first. And I said, why are you seeking superintendency? I was like, well, a little masochistic, I guess. But, this superintendency, I have always aspired to be a superintendent. In 29 years of education, I've always had the goal of being an instructional leader at the superintendent level. And that's what I've always said I'm going to do. Now, why Easthampton? Well, I was here for 6 years, and we had an amazing collaborative time together. And we did some great stuff. We built a new school. I was mentored by a fantastic educator. I worked with teachers who care about kids, and it showed. We went from level 3 to level 1 while I was here. And that's not because of Vito, that's because of us and what we did, empowering teachers, creating a place where people trusted each other enough to work together to move us forward in a positive way. That's what I want to do. That's why I want to be superintendent. That's why I want to be superintendent here. I told you, when I walked in this building, it felt like I was coming home. It's awesome. I'm getting fired up right now just thinking about it. Now, when you think about skill sets, 8 years ago when I left, I was starting to be a pretty good principal, right? With 5 years experience as a principal in West Springfield at a much more diverse school, a much larger school. I had a team. I had one VP when I was here. I had 3 VPs. I had an an AD. I had 5 school adjustment counselors. I mean, we had a huge team when I was principal there. But I learned and I grew in my experience as a leader. That learning and growing, unfortunately, missteps happen. You learn from them, right? And you become a better leader as long as you're reflective in your practice, as long as you're able to be constructively self-critical, as long as you're able to take feedback and to work with a mentor, to rock and roll with kids. That's what it's all about. Anybody that knows me knows that I wasn't in my office. I was in the hallways, I was at lunch, I was at games, I was at musicals. And that happened in West Side too, because that's what makes it worth doing. So my skill set, for 29 years, I've worked in education, and I have grown as an educator, I've grown as a leader, and I've learned that no one can do it by themselves. Nobody. It's all about collaboration. It's all about empowering others to rise up and lead too. I think about some of the amazing teachers that are in this building and the work that we did together and the work that they carried on under new leadership. It's awesome. That's what I want to bring back. I talk about my experience as an athlete a lot because it meant a lot to me. And it helped me grow as a person. One of the first honors I ever received was to be the captain of my football team because I was voted on by my peers. One of the next great honors I had, and this is a aside, was when I was invited by the senior class in Easthampton to come speak at their graduation when I was gone for 2 years. And they asked me to come back and speak. And I cried a little bit. I think I was wearing this tie. You know? But that's really, that's what it's all about, you know? And that's part of it, is connecting and engaging and being present and putting yourself out there. And I think that's all part of the skill set that I bring to the table. Why do you know what? Easthampton gave me my first opportunity to be a principal. I was coming from Carson City, Nevada. I was an assistant principal at a middle school of 1,200 kids, pretty diverse in Carson City. And I came back here and I got an opportunity to lead. And I wasn't awesome, but I learned to be good. And I learned what it meant to be a leader. And what that means is you can't do it by yourself. And I think my skills match the needs of this school and this district and this community just like they did back then. But I think I'm a little better at what I do than I was then. And I want to bring that back here.
Have you ever dealt with a problem in which opinions were polarized? Something akin to a question of capital punishment, choice, fundamentalist belief, long-standing political biases, etc. What did you do? How did you plan? And what did you learn?
I think we all have, right? Starting in 2016 with that election. And 14-15 was my last year here. And in my second year as principal in Westside, we went through that collective experience together as a nation. And it did indeed polarize. And it did indeed empower people to be xenophobic and hateful and spiteful and vitriolic. And things I never heard, I heard in the halls of Westside, right? Sorry. Things I never saw, tag-wise, graffiti-wise, I saw in the bathrooms at Westside. And we had a problem. And Vito couldn't solve it by himself. So what did we do? We identified the problem, we collaborated, we worked together, we brought, and this was probably the beautiful thing, a strong contingent of kids came up and they became leaders with a strong contingent of teachers to say, no, not here. It's not going to happen. And we addressed it and we took action. Now, did we solve the problem? Absolutely not. That problem's been going on forever. It's going to go on probably forever after this, but we can't let things hide. We got to get after it. We have to address it. And we have to move forward in a positive way. You walk into Westside, West Springfield High School, you walk into the cafeteria and you look up to the right, you'll see a wall of flags. That wall of flags represents every student's heritage in our building, and it's growing. Right? And that was one act that we took to bring us together, to stop the polarization of our school. Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. You know, do kids still use the N-word as a greeting with each other? Yes. Is that okay? Nope. Is it in song lyrics? Yep. Are they singing those songs in the hallway? Unfortunately, they are. What do we do about that? It's a problem. Let's address it. I've totally lost track of myself right now. Oh, yeah, that was it. So thinking about that polarization and how we bring people together, that's what we did. And it's not about what I did, it's about what we did. How do we work together to address and redress a problem like that? right? And unfortunately, social media, the media, loves it, right? It's ratings, it's all over the place. But we can only do what we can do in our sphere of influence. And that's what we did to try and fix that problem.
Well, you won't be surprised by this question. In many districts, including Easthampton, world languages are often among the first disciplines to be cut when budgets are tight and the educational focus is on standardized test scores. What are your thoughts regarding reinstating a middle school program and/or exploring a dual language program begun in the elementary levels?
Well, unfortunately, I was here when I was at the high school when changes were made in the curriculum. And you're absolutely correct. It was about cuts. It was about resources. It was about triage. Unfortunately, the MCAS tested subjects were the subjects that got resources. The non-MCAS tested subjects were the ones that didn't. So, world languages. If I could, I'd like to talk about my son, Tyler. Tyler went to Hampshire Regional High School. In Hampshire Regional, he studied Spanish for 3 years, and then he started taking German online. And that experience with German, now, another aside, my wife's family's from Austria, so they're German speakers. So he had a desire to explore that. He had the ability to explore it because it was offered. Now, he lives in Berlin, he's bilingual, and he's on his own in another country because of the opportunity that was afforded him in high school. So I would argue that there's value in looking at world languages and finding a way, finding the resources to return them in a reasonable manner. Now, what does that mean? Well, currently we're going through the same argument in Westside, right? They used to have three languages at the middle school. It was French, Spanish, and Italian, I think it was. Now it's just Spanish. Oh, at the high school level, right? So world language is important to a world that's becoming tighter and tighter, right? Now, I would say we don't have the resources or the inclination to be an immersion type school, right? There's charter schools and everything that are doing those things. I mean, we are a public school. We can't do everything for everyone, but we can look at world languages and say, school committee, parents, is it important enough to reallocate resources to it? And I would argue, in my case, my son benefited greatly from the opportunity. Now, the dual language program, I don't know that I don't know. I guess exploring things and checking things out, I'm game to see what's going on there. But I think a reasonable first step is to really think about world languages and what's the benefit to those who study them. You're welcome.
What role do you see MCAS / standardized testing playing in our school system? Is there any other standardized testing that you see as valuable, and how have you used it?
So the kids threw a couple softballs. You guys are not messing around with softballs. You're throwing high heat. Okay. I guess it's how you use it. You know, I think about the analogy of, you know, the checkup versus the postmortem, right? So the checkup you get value from, right? Because it does a litmus test and a dipstick of where you are, how things are going, right? The postmortem, you're done, right? We're just seeing on what killed you. And when I think about those standardized tests, the value of that data, when the kids have taken the test the year before and then they're a grade up, how are we using that to improve or help them improve and grow? You know, we're really not. they try to do a metric around growth, but that's a pretty statistically difficult concept to wrap your head around if you've ever tried to. So I think the role of MCAS and standardized tests in our school system is set by the government. And they tie funding to it. If you don't want to do it, then you don't get the funds that come with it. And our state sees value in, the department, the board, and the commissioner. I just had a meeting yesterday with the commissioner, not me personally, but we superintendents had a meeting with the commissioner. And he talked about this. I just talked to a parent tonight about it. I want to opt my kids out. For what's the value of that? The commissioner talked about it. We see, and by we I mean the state, sees value in this so that we can check accountability. Make sure you're doing the right things. Make sure you're reaching and meeting the needs of the kids, at least in that area. I talked to the kids in Brian's room today. You know that cartoon that shows a teacher with a bunch of animals in front of him, right? And it says, okay, we're going to have a test today. Climb that tree. You got a fish in a fishbowl, right? You got a giraffe, an elephant, a squirrel, and a monkey. So the squirrel and the monkey are psyched. They're smiling. The other ones are like, what are we going to do? And that's kind of the mentality that I had with the kids and talking about testing. Is it meeting kids where they're at? Is it showing their problem-solving skills? Is it showing their ability to, take something and make something? Not really. So we started talking about capstone projects. We started talking about interdisciplinary project-based learning, with the kids. But how do you test that at the school-wide level? How do you do that with a 10th grade class to see where they are? It's challenging. So we have to find a way to balance the requirements of the state with the needs of our kids. Is there any standardized tests? Something that we used pretty effectively in Westside was the PSAT. And we use it as a diagnostic to look at AP potential, right? Are students showing a capacity to have some success? Are there specific skills that we need to be working on? But that goes, you dial that back and start digging into it. Well, does that test meet, does it meet kids where they're at culturally? With respect to their upbringing, their systems at home? And I would argue they probably don't. So we have to find other ways to see where kids are at to meet their needs. And I talked about this earlier, those authentic, relevant things that we're doing, more formative things that we're doing, to really dial in to see what Marin needs to grow and move forward, right? And what Vito needs. And that might be two different things. But we have to find a way to see where we're at so we can meet you there.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, just a quick question. Is there like a time limit or something? Because sometimes I go...
You're fine.
I'm good? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually I ask that question. All right, I'm ready then. Sorry.
How would you spend your first 3 months or your first 6 months as superintendent in Easthampton? What would your initial priorities be?
Well, I've been gone for 8 years, and though I know many people, and I know this building like you have no idea, I want to learn. I want to know what I don't know anymore. I want to see those teachers in the classrooms that I don't know, right? And there's students I have that are teaching. It's so exciting. When I bumped into 2 students today and they're teaching here. That just made my heart swell, But what I need to do is learn and understand. What does the community need? What do parents need? What does the school committee want? What does the city need? How can we collaborate to meet the needs of our kids? How can we identify resources to go to those priorities that we've established because we've talked to the school committee, but almost more importantly, no hard feelings, the parents, right? What do the kids need? So first 3 months, well, I tell you what, I'm going to be out and about. If I were to be the successful candidate, I would be out and about. I would be in classrooms. I would be in buildings. I would be talking to teachers. I'd be sitting down with parents. I'd be talking to kids. Let's talk to those seniors. What'd you get? What did we miss? What could we do better? Those are the things we need to do. I tell you what my priority is going to be. Probably similar to what my priority was this year. I'm truly a believer in keeping things simple. So when I was principal at the high school in West Springfield, I challenged kids to do 4 things. Own your learning. Grow school spirit. Lead in a positive way. And, oh God, hold on. Oh, I can't believe it. Grow school spirit. Oh, and serve in the community. Those are the 4 things that I asked those kids to do. Keep it simple, right? What are the things that I wanted our team to do as a leadership team in the central office? Communicate, collaborate, community, compassion. Those are the 4 C's that I wanted to focus on, right? Make sure that we're communicating with the city and we're collaborating with them. Make sure that we are consistently communicating with parents, with stakeholders, with caregivers. Make sure that everyone's understanding of what the expectations are within their roles and their responsibilities. And then always balancing that stuff that I just talked about against Mass General Law, policy, contract, practice. Those would be my priorities. Keep it simple. And be communicative as we rock and roll.
Thank you.
You got it.
I have the next question for you. Integrating anti-racist curriculum is more than a diversity day or a few lessons sprinkled in throughout the year. Have you ever completed a curriculum review and overhaul as it applies to anti-racism from pre-K through high school? Can you describe some of the successes and obstacles that you encountered as you worked through an overhaul like that?
Wow. You guys are not messing around. All right. Okay. So, probably one of the most important things we need to be doing right now. For the last 3 years in West Springfield, we have been doing just that. That work is extremely challenging because there's a lot of ignorance around the terms, around the vocabulary, around what it actually means, right? When you talk about inclusion and diversity and equity, what is anti-racism? What does that mean? So, yeah, we're doing that work. But that work doesn't just happen. That work takes time. And so our process was guided by Dr. Tamika LaSalle, who's she's a rock star. Used to be at UConn, she's now at Georgia State. But she came and she said, listen, this work is hard, this work is challenging. And it's not instant gratification. And so what she said, and we totally bought in, this is about building a system and putting a system in place. And so we started at the district level with a district equity team. And we informed our ignorance around what those things mean. And we looked at what the priorities were going to be. And we brought people together to articulate what those priorities are. Giving voice to people, empowering people, making sure that our policies and our practices are not hitting some kids in a good way and some kids in a bad way. And that work has taken 3 years, but now we're at a place where there's an equity team. I'm sorry, Lori. There's an equity team at West Springfield High School and at the middle school and at the elementary schools. And they're doing PD with teachers. And they're, next year, planning to bring it out and roll it to the high school. So yes, I've done that work. And again, I shouldn't even say that. We've done that work, and that work is hard, and that work is challenging. And some people don't like it. They don't like that work because it challenges everything they thought they knew. And it's difficult, and you have difficult conversations. But it's too important not to do, because if we don't do it, we lose kids. And that's unacceptable. Now, we're doing it, we're not doing it perfectly. And we have to, it's a work in progress. We have to operate from a growth mindset. We have to operate from a place where we are reflective in our practice. And absolutely correct. We have to look at our curricula. We have to look at our policies. We have to look at, you name it, attendance, data, discipline. There's a lot going on there. So, successes, we've had some, I would say we've had some successes with forums, but, you know, it's like you build it, are they going to show up? We've had some forums, we got COVIDed, so some of the forums were virtual. We got Zoom bombed, you know, we lived and learned. So we've had some successes, we've had some challenges, but I would suggest that the work is too important not to do. And I would also suggest that if we're not including the kids in the work and their parents in the work, then the work is incomplete.
How would you describe your leadership style? In what areas are you continuing to improve your leadership style? And what particular strengths do you believe you will bring to Easthampton?
I'm an excitable guy. I get fired up. I get fired up. So when I became interim this year, one of my personal reflections was, Vito, you need to respond instead of react. And that might seem simplistic, but really, if you think about it, reaction is about emotion, right? It's that visceral, right? And on the football field, that's all right. But as an interim superintendent, that's not all right. So you have to respond. You have to be thoughtful. You have to be objective, right? In the moment, you have to de-escalate the emotions. So I've learned that needs to be part of the tool in the toolbox, right? Because I got the excitement part down. I can do that stuff, right? As a coach, as a player, I got that. But with respect to leadership style, I do tend to be more coach-like than anything. And I think I've learned a lot in that way. I've learned from great coaches, great leaders about that. So I think my style, that's kind of my own. I'm not those mentors who came before me. I'm me, and I'm kind of unapologetic about that. But I tell you what, I get to a place where I love the kids, and I love the teachers, and I love what I'm doing. And I want people to know that. I want people to feel that. This is what it's all about. So what am I going to bring to Easthampton? Well, I'm not like a rah-rah guy, you know, it's more about getting excited in the moment of what you're doing, you know, like just when you're in a classroom and you see a teacher just killing it and the kids are just in it, it's what it's all about. And celebrating that success, right? And sharing that stuff with you guys. I mean, that is what it's about. And that's kind of what my leadership style is. But that being said, I want to make sure I'm being collaborative, I'm communicating, I'm operating from compassion, and I'm thinking about the community. And those things are always on my mind.
Thanks, Anthony. Hold on 1 second. Okay, how do you judge the performance of the staff members who report to you? And what characteristics do you see as distinguishing a better employee from one whose performance is simply average? What can you do to try to make superior staff out of average performers?
You know, there's the education evaluation system answer. There's kind of the coach answer. And I think it's a combination of those things. Because I am an adherent of the EdEval system. And anybody that I evaluated knows that I'm going to give them feedback. I'm going to be there and I'm going to observe. I'm going to answer questions. I'm going to support them. I'm going to hold them accountable to the rubric, right? So we have 4 standards, and we're going to be really crystal clear on what those elements of focus are. What is the most important thing to be doing in the classroom? We're going to make sure that you have goals as an educator that are in line vertically with the goals of the school and the goals of the district, the strategic plan, right? So when there's continuity vertically between the strategic plan of the district, the school improvement plan, and my individual goals as an educator, student learning and professional practice, that gives us a basis from which to make some really sound judgments. And it can't just be about a rubric, right? When I walk into your classroom, what do I see? Do I see engaged kids? Do I see a student-centered classroom? Do I see a didactic teacher just kind of standing and delivering? What do I see? Based on that, that feedback is going to drive how we take a teacher who might be here and bring that teacher to here. But there's one thing I've always tried to think about, and that's we as educators in a profession aren't necessarily treated professionally, nor do we act professionally, when I think about how we do what we do. If I were a surgeon, right, and I'm in my theater, my operating theater, and I've found a way to do something that works and it saves lives, what do? Do I hide that and shut my door? No, I open the door and I say, hey, come on in, Megan. Check this procedure out. Look what I'm doing here. Then the next time, let's do this together. Then the next time, she's doing it in her operating theater, and that's how best practice spreads. And that's what I mean by acting professionally. We need to open our doors. We need to identify best practice, and we need to spread that best practice. So, you got a rock star teacher, and they're in this school, they're in this district. Well, let's leverage that rock stardom so that we can bring an average teacher or a new teacher. Because nobody just gets to rock star status. They had to have growth to get there. But you can't do that in isolation. It takes collaboration, one of the 4 C's, right? And it takes trust. When I was here those years ago, identifying teacher leaders, empowering those teacher leaders to do, and then allowing them to work with their peers, right? It started with, hey, I'm going to teach a lesson and I'm going to film it. And then we're going to look at it together as a staff. What's different between what I did and what you do, right? What's good, what's bad? And there's a trust that's developed. And before you know it, we weren't just volunteering, we were just all in. And people were able to go into a classroom and visit and look for specific engagement strategies, specific depth of knowledge, like the stuff that's higher level thinking. How do you get kids up here? The only way you do that is you get a teacher that gets them up here. And in order to spread that best practice, we have to act professionally. In that, we act like other professions, right? And that means sharing our ideas, identifying best practice, spreading that best practice. That's how you get a teacher from here that's new to here. Now, can they all be rock stars? No. But if we aspire to that and we reflect on what we're doing in our practice and we trust our peers and our evaluators and we become partners and collaborators of this, we're going to improve. And we did. And the kids benefited.
Okay. Following a shouting match with fellow senior Sally Smith, Jane Jones asked her friend, senior Cynthia Brown, to beat Sally up for $25. Cynthia accepts the assignment and sucker punches Sally outside the cafeteria. Sally, blindsided, doesn't have time to respond before teachers separate them and secure the area. Sally emerges with a sore jaw, but otherwise without serious harm. She's very upset. Her parents are called and they take her home for the day. Cynthia's parents are also called to school where they and their daughter learn of a 5-day suspension for fighting. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, however, are outraged that this was allowed to happen, especially because they do not know why the assault took place. The principal has a very poor relationship with the chief of police, and fearing the bad publicity, explains to the Smiths that he will investigate himself before going to the local authorities. When they hear nothing for 3 days, the Smiths file a criminal complaint with the local police. The local reporter is tipped off and finds the complaint on the police blotter. It is a lead story in the local weekly's next edition several days later. That's where the school committee learns about it, assess the situation.
Yeah. So, my assessment of the situation is that criminal behavior up to and including assault is unacceptable. We do have to do our due diligence and investigate. We do have to allow due process for all students in the building, the puncher and the one who is punched. But we have an obligation to keep our students safe. We also have an obligation to communicate with the parents of both students and to do it in a timely manner. Mass general law allows us to emergency remove a student based on specific actions, right? So when you start thinking about mass general law, I could, if a student is putting others at risk or themselves at risk, I can emergency remove that student from the building. Additionally, Chapter 70, 36, 36 and a half, 36 and 3/4 are the regulations that oversee suspensions, right? So when you look at 36, it's about violence against staff and drugs, right? Alcohol or drugs. And those are suspensions. 36 and a half has to do with felony charges or a felony. And then 36 and 3/4 is everything else, right? So we have to determine, as an administrator, where we are in this continuum, right? In this situation, we have a responsibility to keep students safe, A. If a student punched another student in the face, then we need to make sure that we communicate with the one that received the punch around their rights and responsibilities with respect to filing a complaint with the police. We also have a responsibility to file where it's allowed. Now, my reaction would have been different than that reaction. I don't want to disparage, if this is a scenario and not a true thing, you know, I don't want to disparage anybody, but I would suggest that the police should have been called, the nurse should have been called, the student that was punched should have been assessed, right? She then goes home, or he, I think it was a she, goes home. The student that did the punching is removed in an emergency capacity while the investigation happens. The police are brought in, and I don't know Well, I know where we are. In West Springfield, we have school resource officers at the high school, the middle school, and at the vocational school. I don't know what grade scenario this is, but at the middle school and the elementary school, that SRO works all of those cases. They're not there as a heavy. They're there as a resource, school resource officer. And that resource, one of them is, hey, this is what happened, Officer Smith. What is that from your perspective as a law enforcement? And they would give guidance around that. They would then connect with their superior and talk about charges being brought. So, that's a messy situation. Now, with respect to communication with the school committee, there's a clear Mass General law that talks about the roles and responsibilities of school committee and superintendent. And of course, there's gray area there. With respect to a situation like this, my communication would be very circumspect. There was an issue at the school that involved violence, it's being investigated, and the police are involved. Because I'll tell you right now, I just had a situation where I was talking to the lawyer, our lawyer, and he said, you got to be careful what's being communicated to the school committee, because there's confidentiality that's involved. Students have rights, and we have to respect those rights.
Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah.
I was so interested in the answer. Okay. How do you see Easthampton assessing our technology needs, and how would you go about looking at a technology plan for use and curriculum in grades K through 12 for our future? Who would you involve in that discussion?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I mean, I know that there's an IT director. I know that there are principals that have their ideas on what roles technology plays in the classroom, in the schools. I know that the reality of the situation out there is we're not going backwards, we're going forwards with respect to technology. So we need to prepare our students for that eventuality. We have to train teachers to use technology seamlessly in their instruction. We need to provide them with the resources to do it. We need the infrastructure to support it. We need the laptops. We need the document cameras. We need the tablets. We're thinking of just that. This whole thing, we're thinking about it in West Springfield. And one of the things we saw was that the Chromebooks, which we thought were going to be awesome in the elementary school, sure, at the middle elementary, the upper 3, 4, 5 maybe, but our littles are having a tough time with that. So what are we going to do? Well, let's look at tablets. The kids using tablets. What's appropriate? What's good for them? What's good for them? What do the parents think? Right? What's the school committee willing to support? How can we partner with the city to share resources to better benefit our teachers, our platforms, our department? Because the other piece is, we built this building, 2 years later, systems were obsolete. Right? 5 years later, now all those things that we bought all at the same time are going kaput, and we got to fix them. That's what's going to happen over there at Mountain View, because we're buying X amount of laptops all at the same time. What's our plan for redoing it? Right now, I had a conversation with I don't remember who I was talking to. It was about the videos in the school and the fact that our platform that was built here now no longer plays with the platform that's going over there. And not only that, but it's obsolete, right? So what are we going to do? How are we going to have a plan for that? So it's again, it's not a Vito has the answer. It's a we need to collaborate to come up with an answer. It's a how can we cooperate with the city to provide the resources and the infrastructure we need to meet the needs of our kids as they move on to what's next.
As you know, issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion can be interpreted in many ways, from racial, gender, religious diversity to neurodiversity and special education, to issues of socioeconomic diversity and class. What are your overarching thoughts about these classifications, and how would you work to ensure that none of these important populations are lost in the shuffle?
I would flop the order of those three words. You know, I think it's because it's alphabetical, DEI, right? It's diversity, equity, inclusion. I think it's got to be inclusion first. That's got to be the first thing we think about, because we want all our kids included. And when we think about inclusion, then we start thinking about the diversity of the students that are in front of us. How do we then equitably meet their needs? When we know, we already talked about this, that their needs are more complex and more difficult, because you're bringing a bunch of different things together. When you start talking about the mental health needs of a student, their IEP needs, their English language learner needs, the fact that maybe they're coming from a low income status, right? That's difficult to do. Then you throw in gender and it boggles the imagination. How are we going to do it? Well, I think the way we do it is by being inclusive. Every kid deserves the right to be in our classrooms. You know, I had a conversation earlier today about a student that their needs are so great that they can't maintain and sustain in the classroom. Well, then we have to find a way to meet them somewhere else. Maybe that's a program, right? Maybe that's a out-of-district placement. We have to do what's best for our kids, but we have to include them legally in what we're doing in the schools. I guess my overarching thoughts about the classifications is that, what if they were my kids, right? I've been blessed. I have 4 beautiful kids. They've had great success in their life. It's awesome. They have educators for parents, right? They're coming from means. Fantastic. Not everybody's in that situation. So what if my students were those students that we're looking at that have those needs? That's how we have to think, because they are our students. You know, that's one of the things I talked about earlier about breaking down silos. I don't know if I talked about that here. I've been talking about a lot of things today. So anyways, thinking about the silos that are created within our departments, where English language learners are here and IEP kids are here, we have to break those silos apart, right? So that we're identifying ways that we can share resources to meet the needs of the kids that are in front of us. Because the alternative is that we lose them. And before I came to Massachusetts, I was in Nevada. I taught in prison for 10 years. And in that experience, I met men who got missed, who in middle school or even younger stopped caring and stopped going. And to a man, this is what I did my PhD on. It was all about correctional education in the state of Nevada. And it was about these experiences that these men had in their formative years. To a man, they said, that's when they started getting in trouble. That's when they started using. That's when they started going down that road. And that's unacceptable. We have to find a way to connect and engage with kids, to be there for them and meet them where they are. And that's what this is all about. And it's too important not to.
Tell us about a time when you had to address a crisis that posed serious consequences for your district. What was the crisis, and how did you or your colleagues deal with the situation?
Okay, September 2022, Vito's in his first month as interim, and he gets a call from the police chief at 5:05, I think it was, in the morning. Active shooter in town. Now, where they were in town, there's 3 schools around that active shooter. You got to make a decision, Vito, what you're going to do in that situation. It's a no-brainer. We got to keep kids safe. We're going to, at a minimum, delay schools opening, because there's not a chance I'm going to let kids drive by that place on their way to a school if someone's shooting, and they were. Now, in that instance, it couldn't have gone any better for us and for the person and for the police. No one was injured, and it was resolved the best it could be. And the person was taken into custody. And we had a delayed opening. Everybody came in. It was all good. But part of it was communicating with everybody, letting people know what's going on. And then reflecting on the incident and learning and moving forward. One of the oopses that Vito did in that instance was one of the calls that's supposed to be made is to make sure the news stations know so that they post it. You know, like for snow days, they post it on the Channel 22 and stuff. I missed that step at 5:10. But in the grand scheme of things, it worked out pretty well. It was a crisis. It was scary. Now, whenever the chief calls me, I get a little anxious. Never know what he's going to say. So, I mean, that would probably be the most immediate. When I was principal, we had an issue when a bomb threat was called in, and we had to deal with that. And in the midst of the bomb threat, we received another call that there was a shooter outside. Now, this was a whole swatting thing, right? There was nothing. It was a kid that was doing what he shouldn't have been doing, and he was routing stuff through Yugoslavia. It was crazy when we got into the investigation. But again, crisis, you can't solve that by yourself. That was a concerted effort. The superintendent was involved, the principal was involved, the police chief. You know, it was a collaborative effort by the community. That's how you have to deal with crises. Right? De-escalate, respond, don't react.
Thank you.
To pivot a little bit, special education is a particular challenge because of the complexity of rules, service needs, and student and parent concerns. How do you assess the effectiveness of your special education programs? What have you done to try to make your special education department work better?
I would say probably one of the best things that's come about through accountability is the tiered focus monitoring, TFMs, where the state comes in with a team and assesses and does a comprehensive deep dive into everything special ed, into everything English language learner, right? And then they give you the results and the findings. So I think that's one way to do that assessment, is to rely on the audits that the state does and to use those reflectively and proactively to address the concerns and the findings. That would be probably one thing. Another thing is to partner with the director of the Special Services Department and his team, her team, to make sure that we're on track with the findings that may have come out, to ensure that we are in compliance with respect to timelines, because that's huge. And bottom line, are we meeting the needs of the kids? You know, how are those kids doing? Are they graduating at a similar rate to the other kids? That's a big question. Are they being disciplined at the same level as other kids, or are they being disciplined more? Right? What does it look like? What does their data look like? That relevant, authentic, local data and MCAS data. What does it look like? And you start putting those pieces together and doing the work that needs to get done. you need to talk to teachers. You need to talk to ETLs, right? What's going on in those meetings, those team meetings? How are parents responding to those interactions? What are the complaints that are being raised, the concerns that are being shared? And what are you doing about it? Are we providing certified teachers to the programs that need them? And I'll tell you right now, that's a struggle. There's a lot of emergency licenses that are being put into place with someone that didn't go through fully the program yet. Now, they might be doing it, and they're getting some great experience, but we got to make sure that we're putting quality people in front of our kids. One of the things that we've done, now, granted, it was kind of a pet peeve of mine that I wanted to focus on, again, those silos, right? We have the SEL director, the EL director, the special services director, and they all operate in isolation. And so the resources then are just staying within their department, right? And it becomes that's your kid, SPED kid, right? Or that's your kid, EL, English language learner. Well, guess what? They are duly identified, okay? And so by separating them, we're doing them a disservice. So what we need to do is break down those silos, collaborate together, ensure that we're bringing the resources to bear to provide the professional development that they need, teachers, and the resources that they need to meet the needs of the kids. We did it. I was really so excited about this, and our EL director was talking about it because it seemed like the LPD opportunities were being pushed aside. So we talked and we got together as a leadership team and said, you know what, let's do some backwards design. Let's look at the whole calendar. Let's look at the needs. And now let's look at the PD that has to get done. When can we fit it in? The half days, the full days, the curriculum days. And then how can we be more efficient in our use of resources? And bring trainers in, because differentiation meets the needs of all kids. Right? So it's a skill that all teachers can benefit from, right? So if I have an English language learner and I'm very explicit in my instruction and my use of vocabulary, guess what? That's going to benefit an IEP kid, and that's going to benefit my kids, right? So we break those silos down and we pool our resources and we backwards design so that we have a comprehensive plan. Now, did it work perfectly? No. But we're going to redo it, and we're going to do it again. And we're going to get some input from teachers, and we're going to get input from ETLs and make sure we're doing it right. Yeah. I mean, I could just go.
When you prepare your budget for the school committee, how do you go about this? And what happens before the proposal reaches the committee?
It's important to be transparent in the process, to be communicative about the process, about the timeline. So the first thing I did was I put together a slide deck, PowerPoint, and I shared it with the school committee and said, here are our drivers, right? Here is the schedule that I'm going to use with the site-based administrators. Here's the template I'm going to use to get their input on their needs, right? And I'm going to ask them to justify those needs, right, with data, but also to provide narrative so that I'm able to take a rationale and match it to a data point and show why I need that school adjustment counselor or why I need that interventionist. Right? So that's where it starts, with a real transparent communication with school committee about how we're doing it. Then it's a partnership with the business manager, right? It's an activity of engagement with the principals who I've asked to make sure that they're going to their leadership team and getting input. What are the needs in the building, right? Physical plan. Now it's a partnership with the city, right? What is the, and West Side's a little different. Our IT department is city side, our HR is city side, and our central maintenance is city side. So part of the conversation around capital needs has to happen with the director of maintenance, right? And so we walked the building together. No, I shouldn't say that. When I was assistant superintendent, I was overseeing facilities, so I would walk the building. Now my interim assistant superintendent walked the building with the central maintenance director and with the facility sub, right? So again, collaboration around the needs in the plant, in the physical plant. So all that stuff is kind of happening on parallel tracks, right? All dictated by a timeline that's been communicated. Then, well, this year was a little tough because we had to wait. We had a new governor, so they didn't have to bring it to us until, or they had an opportunity to bring it to us in March instead of in February. So we were kind of rolling the dice a little bit because we didn't quite know where we were going to land with respect to SOA, with the Student Opportunity Act, and what we were going to be, how we were going to be financed. What did happen, though, is the state gave us a tool to do some predictions on what we thought we'd get based on where we were as a district. And that predictive tool was pretty spot on. And we were able to use it to make some predictions around what we were going to get. West Side gets more than Easthampton. So we were able to look at ESSER, the federal grants that we used during COVID, and identify positions that we could take off of that and put on our budget. So part of it is a collaborative process around needs and wants and identifying which is which, hearing from principals, communicating, and being transparent. Now the end of that question, there's no surprises. There should be no surprises, right? The budget sub is part of those conversations, just like the facility sub was, just like the curriculum sub was, right? So it's a collaborative effort, no surprises. Now, of course, the mayor, in their purview, has the ability to make changes, and that's okay. And I had a meeting with the mayor and his CFO and my business manager, and we talked about things. No surprises. Transparency, communication, collaboration. Man, it's killing me.
So what is the most important decision you've made in the last year or two? How did you go about developing your decision or course of action? And what alternatives did you consider?
Wow. Most important decision. God. I mean, you make so many decisions in this position. I might skip to the other part of the question. How'd you go out developing a decision of course of action? So the development of a decision and a course of action really is a collaborative effort. I mean, I should have my parrot here. I have a parrot at home, Rico. He could say collaborative all the time. But that's really what it's about, is collaborating with our team, right? So when I think about decision making, you know, we have to make sure we're bringing the people to the table that need to be at the table. We have to then put ideas on the table and identify which of those ideas works in that situation. God, we made some personnel decisions. I guess probably one of the most important decisions that was made in the last 2 years, and it wasn't made in isolation, so I can't take the credit. But it had to do with the curriculum that we were going to adopt for elementary education and literacy. And it was called interreading. And that decision, believe it or not, was collaborative. And we involved teachers in that. And so we had reading specialists and teachers vetting HQIMs, right? The high quality instructional materials that the state puts out there for us to look at. And we went through a process, pretty exhaustive process, to identify one that meets the needs of our kids. And I'll tell you right now, the implementation of that program and the determination of which program to go with were two different things. Because right now, teachers are in a place where they're not familiar with the curriculum that they've been given. And we're giving them training as we go. So I guess that is one of the most important decisions. It's based on, that program is based on the science of reading, which is a topic of huge debate among specialists, among educators. But with a focus on fundamental skills for kids, right? And phonics. And ensuring that our kids are able to code and understand what they're reading. That's kind of the premise behind it all. And it's the use of assessment to make sure that, and I'm not talking about MCAS, I'm talking about authentic kind of formative assessment to identify what Shannon needs in respect to those foundational skills, those fundamental skills of reading. And then matching the intervention with the need. And you'll see clusters, right? So as you look at the data, there's clusters of kids that are having a tough time with this skill. So we put them together with support. And then over here, we have other kids, right? So it's really about meeting the needs of the kids that are in front of us, assessing where they are, and ensuring that the teachers have the support they need to make it happen. So I guess, as I talked myself into this one, this was a pretty important decision. But it wasn't made in isolation. But it's hugely important. And we're still having, I don't know if Sean's here, we're having huge concern from the union around it. And that's not a bad thing. Why? Because teachers have been doing this for 20 years, and this is different, right? So, did we implement it well? Did we put enough thought into how we rolled it out? Right? Did we talk to other districts that are implementing it? Yeah, we did. And they said the same thing. The first year is not fun. But when you start seeing the data, and when I looked at the kindergarten data this year, it's amazing. Right? And those kindergartners now, as they grow into the program, are going to have the benefit of those foundational skills as they move forward. And so, yeah, that's it. That's the decision.
And that's your answer.
That's the one. I knew I'd get there.
Just a quick follow-up. When you talked about bringing the people that need to be at the table,
yeah.
How do you know who should be there?
Well, what we did was we looked at our elementary teachers, right? So we looked at the classroom teachers, we looked at the reading specialists, we looked at the interventionists, we looked at the special services and English language learner department. And we brought those cohorts together. And we put them through a protocol to assess the different options that DESE was putting forward as HQIM, right? And that process took months, right? Literally, like a quarter of a year, months. And in the end, we got it down to a 2, and then we brought it to everybody, all the elementary levels, right? And they all weighed in on it. And there was a determination made that this is the one that we wanted to go through. So I guess the determination was made by the leadership team at the central office and the principals.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Tell us about your experience working with children and families who don't look like you or speak the language you do or do not have the same economic advantages you do. How have these experiences shaped your view of public education and its mission?
I guess probably I'll go back to prison and talk about that experience, because that's really where I wasn't in.
It's just,
I was just teaching there. But that experience was that was an awakening for me, because in Carson City, you know, Hispanic population was pretty strong. Native American population pretty strong. African American not as much, but representative. But in prison, right? The different groups were the majority, not the minority. And that says something. Right? So in my classroom in Carson City when I was in the high school, it's probably like what you see here. But when I taught in prison, that's not what you saw. Right? So they're overrepresented, those populations, in the Northern Nevada Correctional Center where I taught. And that was my first awakening of, wow, you know, there's something going on here. And I tell you what, some of the best, most exciting conversations I had about literature, I had in that prison. And those guys, when they were sparked and turned on to literature, it was awesome, right? You know, when I was juxtaposing Machiavelli with Machiavelli and Tupac, and having that conversation, and those guys were just turned on, unbelievable. When those men were given an opportunity to be educated, they didn't come back to prison. Flat out. Recidivism rate drops when people become educated. You would think that's duh, right? But that isn't the case, because it's still happening. Go walk in a prison around here. It's not representative. Our minoritized populations are overrepresented in those facilities. Why? Because when we give them an opportunity for education, they don't come back. You know, I think about, this is a huge digression, but I think about, I had a student in my class, young guy in his, you know, late teens, early 20s, and really good student, but he was ditching. He wasn't coming to class, and then he'd come to class and he was ditching. I was like, listen, man, I had a hard conversation with him. I said, listen, man, you need to be here. Well, 2 days later, his father came in. He was on the yard too. And he's like, why are you talking to my son like that? And at first I said, listen, we're in prison. He's 19 years old. I'm not having this conversation with you. I said, you got to understand that he's a man and I'm dealing with him as an adult. But the thing that hit me was his father was in prison with him. And it's just a sad reality of what we're facing in this country. So when I think about that, that's my first experience with it. Now, when I came here, it was more of an experience like I had when I was in school, in high school. But when I went to West Side, that all changed, right? Because of the diversity within that building. You know, we have kids from everywhere, speaking a bunch of different language, looking different, right? So you have to find ways to connect with kids. You have to find ways to engage with their parents. You have to get out of your place of comfort so that you can make them or allow them to trust you. So how has that experience shaped my view of public education? It's reinforced how daunting public education is. The challenges that we face to meet kids where they are. Just look at, right, we have 7 people, right, in the classroom. We have to differentiate to meet you where you are. Now we throw in, well, you're an IEP student and you're an L and an IEP student. You're from low income. How do we do that? It's daunting. So we have to find a way to engage and connect and make sure that we're meeting the needs of the students. And that takes resources, right? That takes cooperation and collaboration with the city. That takes the support of the school committee. But I tell you, one of the things that we're missing, I think, and it's difficult because I'm a parent too, is parent engagement. How do we do it? How do we get them in the building? How do we get the community in the building? What can we do to expand the opportunities for our kids to be ambassadors outside of the building and to get people in the building? People that look like our kids. How do we do that? It's a challenge. So I guess that's how the experiences have shaped my view. It's daunting, it's a challenge, but it's surmountable. We can do it. We can't do it alone. And you can't do it alone. We have to do it together. That's what it's all about. Is galvanizing that togetherness, right? To solve the problems, to address the concerns, to apply the resources. I don't have all the answers, but we probably do.
So the next question, you really answered in
Awesome, we can skip it then.
question, but you probably have another good answer.
All right.
So, please tell us about your experience working in the curriculum area that might include identifying a need to revise curriculum, so such as you did with the reading curriculum, implementing a new curriculum, or assessing the curricula that is already in place. What did you learn from these experiences, and how would you use what you have learned?
Probably one of the biggest challenges we faced when I was principal at the high school was the math pathway. And one thing that happened 10 years or so ago, about 10 years or so ago, is they started pushing standards down, right? And what I mean by that is standards that before were taught at the high school level are now being taught at the middle school level, right? And so those standards got pushed down and they were being assessed, but the curricula didn't change. So we had to look and take a hard look at our math curriculum. And again, I don't have the answer. I was an English teacher. You want to talk lit? I'm with you. But math, different conversation. So what we needed to do was, again, have a vertical conversation with the middle school, right? Department chair, principal, curriculum VP, in the high school. We had to have a conversation with the community colleges. Are those kids coming out prepared for what's next, right? With respect to math, or aren't they? Is little Vito, when he goes to college, is he taking the 100 level class because he didn't do well enough on that initial assessment? Or is he able to rock and roll into the credit-bearing classes? And that's what we found, is that our kids were, in fact, struggling. And so we looked at other communities. What are you doing in Agawam? What are you doing in Westfield? What's happening here? What's happening there? What's happening in Long Meadow? Right? And we assessed and we revamped the pathway. And that was a big we. That was certainly not a me, right? Because the curriculum director, I was at the principal level at that time. The curriculum director was involved. It was a vertical articulation between the middle school, the high school, and community colleges. And, we're still bumpy in the road there. Because when you really think about it, what's happening at the elementary schools to prepare kids for what they're going to see, right? So we have a new math curriculum, illustrative math, that's being taught. And similar to the experience of the elementary school teachers, the high school math teachers are in a place where now they are teaching a new curriculum, right, on the go. Now, we piloted it last year, and those teachers who piloted it are working with teachers who didn't have the experience to try and ease the way for them. Now, I'm very familiar with this because my wife teaches at the high school. She's a special ed teacher, and she co-teaches in a class with a math teacher. And it's a challenge. But, you just got to roll up your sleeves, collaborate, get to work.
Next question.
Okay.
How have you built lines of communication with the various district stakeholders, such as your leadership team, the faculty, community leaders, business interests, and families?
That's one of the 4 C's, don't you know? Right? Communication, that's a big one. And there's multiple platforms for communication. And what I try to do is use them. Now, in our district, that's a challenge because of the languages. But there's a platform called Talking Points that we use. And it's used to quite good effect. And it allows teachers to communicate with parents. It allows me to communicate with the community on like quick basis. I just put my message in and they translate it and send it. We also have family liaisons who coordinate translations and interpretations. Social media. When I started, I was told you must use Twitter, and I was not a social media guy, but it's a great platform to communicate, right? Hey, there's a fundraiser coming out. I take the flyer, I take a picture, and I push it out to the 4,000 people that are my followers on Twitter. So what platforms are available to us, including the website, Talking Points, social media, email. We have what's called School Messenger in West Springfield, and School Messenger is, again, a platform where I can put a message out. Usually those are a little bit more in depth. I can put attachments on it. I can translate. So I might send a letter out and have it translated into our 5 main languages and attach all those things and push it. So yeah, communication is huge, and I joke, but it is serious. It's one of the 4 C's that I have focused on as a foundation for everything that we do. And, you know, I've set the expectation that we all are going to do that. From the central office team to the principals to the teachers. And the expectation that my teachers are going to communicate with parents about what's going on in the classroom. Little Vito's a little squirrely today. You know, we have to have a conversation. You know, no surprises. Communicate, collaborate.
All right. You're at the end.
Woo-hoo-hoo! Hallelujah!
So, this last one, this completes our questions for you.
Okay.
And now you are welcome to ask any questions of us and then to make a closing statement.
Okay. I have to say, today was pretty intense. You know, I complimented you on the process, you know, Ms. Colby, amazing facilitation of the process. But when I think about today, I mean, were you trying to D us up a little bit? It was tough. It was intense. And now you want me to ask questions?
Do you need a cookie?
I am a little hangry right now. No, I'm good. You know, I asked a lot of questions today. I heard a lot of things. One of the questions I asked to every group I could that I didn't run out of time on was, what are the things that wake you up at 3 in the morning? Because I have those things, right? I have those things. They wake me up at 3 in the morning, and then the radio goes on, and I have to deal with that before I can go back to sleep. So I asked all the different people I talked to, what are those things that wake you up at 3 in the morning? And I got a lot of really good answers, and those are the things that we need to focus on, right? Those are things that people are losing sleep over. You know, and I heard about the needs of our kids, and I heard about the need for resources, and I heard about maintenance of facility, and how do we maintain and keep that beautiful new school a beautiful new school. And those are the things that are keeping people up. So I really don't have a ton of questions about that. I guess this has been, it seems to me anyways, a protracted, extended thing. It's challenging, to maintain. So I guess what's next is a question I have with respect to this process. I'll start there.
What's next with our hiring process?
Yeah.
Okay, so after you're done, we are going to take a break, and then we are going to publicly talk. And then we're going to make a choice.
Awesome.
And take some votes.
And then there'll be communication from...
Tonight.
Tonight?
Tonight.
I'm done then. I don't want to wait any longer. I guess, really, and I just want to close. I want to tell you, I am so excited to be back here and to have this opportunity to reconnect with this community, to reconnect with the kids and the teachers and the principals in this district. I have awesome memories of this building and being a part of the life of it. And I walked in here today for one of my meetings, and I swear to God, I felt like I was floating. It felt like I came home. I'm 15 minutes from here. I think about the opportunity to be here and end my career here. My daughter's a junior. I got one in college. I'm gonna have two in college. I got 6-7 years left, and I could think of nothing better than to end it in Easthampton. That's all I got.
That's okay. All right, well, thank you. You can take a break.
Thank you.
You
I
are
need a little
done.
help, but
You are done.
wow, that was pretty intense.
That's how we roll.
Yeah, you're wrong. Awesome. Okay.
We need to dismiss us? or do we-
Yeah, no, so I am just going to announce that we're going to take a break. Okay? I'm thinking 10 minutes. Yes, 10? Okay.
Sure.
All right, give people a quick chance to...
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.